Hello, my name is Denver Clark, founder of yogateachersupport.com, and today we'll be exploring the use of props in the yoga practice. The use of props in the practice is primarily credited to BKS Iyengar, founder and inventor of Iyengar Yoga. And what I love about using props in the practice is it really allows us to create a dynamic experience for our students to reconsider the ways in which they relate to the prop and to the practice and the postures themselves, as well as to themselves and their tendencies mentally and emotionally. When I first came out of my 200-hour teacher training about 16 years ago, there was this big divide in the yoga industry between the Iyengar practitioners and the Ashtanga practitioners. And so when I told people I was a yoga teacher, 50% of the people coming into my classes or discussing the concept of yoga with me were, for lack of a better term, anti-prop. They thought that the prop was a crutch. It was a way to cheat at the practice. And then the people who practiced Iyengar yoga felt the opposite, right? That the prop was the only way to get the proper energetic alignment. Luckily, we're at a place now where the yoga industry is moving toward more therapeutic applications of yoga, and more students are coming into the space open and willing to explore the prop. But I still find myself meeting students who don't quite understand what the purpose is of the prop on the mat. And a lot of teachers that I've met who will mention the prop as an afterthought once the students are already in the pose. Oh yeah, you can use a block here, without any real integration of how to use it and why it can be useful. So when we come together today, we're going to explore 3 basic props that you find in pretty much every yoga studio: straps, blocks, and blankets. And the goal for me as a teacher is to take the prop and make it something that creates a different relationship to the pose itself. There are a couple tips that I like to use when I'm integrating props into the practice and remind teachers to use as well. Number 1, don't make the prop optional. If you include the prop in your sequence as another tool to get through the sequence, then your students don't have to make a choice on whether they do or don't need the prop, because they're not really sure whether they do or don't need it, and they might have a mental block to the fact that the prop is a crutch in their mind. Number 2 is to make sure that when you're utilizing the prop, you're not stepping the practice up or down systematically. An example is, if you want more, if you want to make this harder, if you want to make it easier, right? So when we find ourselves using the prop, if we can integrate it in a way that allows our students to use it without knowing, is this making this pose harder or easier? Or if we present the prop in such a way where at first it makes the posture a little more challenging, and then in the next breath it gives an option to make the posture a little bit more accessible, then we're sort of all over the place in the use of the prop, and the student can really relax into trusting the process and trusting you as a teacher. Number 3 is to use the prop as often as possible in your class. I come from a performance background first. I grew up in a dance studio. My parents were dance teachers and owned a studio. And then I went on to college for my BFA in musical theater. And the rule of thumb in the performance industry is if you're going to go through the act of purchasing the prop and bringing the prop on stage and making sure everybody has a prop, then you really want to use it as many different ways as possible, as creatively as possible. And when we're teaching from a perspective of creativity and integration and really using what's available to us as much as we can to the fullest extent, exhausting all of our options, that challenges us as teachers, but it also challenges our students. Again, reframing their relationship to the practice. There are only so many yoga postures that we can do. And if we approach the posture the same way every time, all the time, our practice starts to feel stale. So by giving your students the opportunity to use the prop as something to push against or pull against or a reference point to really feel the alignment of the pose in a kinesthetic manner, they remember that lesson later, even when they're not using the prop in that posture in a different capacity, whether it's in your class or someone else's class years and years down the line. And so the prop is another tool for us to teach a deeper concept to our students about how to approach their practice. We've got the ability to use the prop to make the pose harder or easier or more accessible. We've got the ability to bring the floor up to us or extend the reach of our limbs. But we also have the relationship that we have to the prop as a tool for learning. And when we surrender our ego and trust the process and accept the assistance of the teacher and the prop, we're really challenging ourselves to release our ego as students. So the prop helps us let go of the ego that we're clinging to, thinking the pose has to look a certain way, and instead trusting that the pose is going to feel a certain way because it looks different on everybody. Number 4, let's take the prop and integrate it into our sequence. If we're going to use it as often as possible, then consider it an additional limb, part of your body even, and move it with you as part of your sequence throughout the practice. Instead of saying, oh, we're going to need a block here and having it all the way at the back of the mat and stopping the flow and going to get it, really thinking mindfully, thinking ahead in your sequence planning process and integrating that into the class is going to make this a lot easier for you as a teacher. And number 5 is, of course, to make sure you practice with the prop ahead of time, right? You get on your mat, you allow yourself to explore, and you ask the question, what else could I do with this prop in this posture? Play. Bring that playful energy into your practice, bring that creativity into your personal practice, and that will shine out when you're teaching and sharing it with other people. I'm really excited to share this information with you. Can't wait to get started. Let's begin.